So, you finally want to build a Supermoto. Well, you've come to the right place. I've got almost 4 years of experience riding Supermotos, and I've been lucky enough to be a part of the Supermoto community for a while now. In that time, I've fully built my personal CRF 450, and I've also helped build and work on a bunch of other bikes as well. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down an in-depth guide on how to build your first Supermoto step by step. Alright guys, step one to building your Supermoto is picking the right bike. So when it comes to picking the right bike, this may be easy for some and difficult for others, but it all comes down to what you want. Now you have three main sectors when it comes to picking your first bike. You have factory pre-built Supermotos, motocross bikes, and you have enduro dual sport bikes. First, we're going to go over the factory built Supermotos. Now when it comes to a factory built Supermoto, there's a lot of bikes to choose from. You have bikes like the DRZ 400 SM, the KTM Husqvarna 690 and 701. There's other bikes like the Ducati Hyper Motard, and there's a lot of these pre-built bikes. You have the 300 SM from Kawasaki. The problem is with these bikes is they're not true form Supermotos. A lot of them are based around motorcycles. If you take the KTM 690 and 701 for instance, the frame is shared with their KTM Duke platform, and it's essentially a motorcycle with dirt bike styling. If you look at bikes like the DRZ 400 SM, it's a great, durable, reliable bike, but is definitely dated, heavy, and low powered compared to a modern 450. Now all these bikes do have pros and cons, but when it comes to building your first Supermoto, this is the easiest option, but not always the best. Now keep in mind, this is absolutely not a bad option at all. If you want a straight out the door Supermoto experience, these pre-built bikes are amazing. But just keep in mind, if you ever ride a 450 Supermoto, some of the pre-built Supermotos will feel a little lackluster compared to one that's been built. Guys, next we have the motocross bikes. Now motocross bikes are a great option if you're planning to do like some track riding or closed course racing. They're lightweight, they're super aggressive, very responsive, but they kind of come with a catch here. As you know, most of them aren't street legal, especially in the US, and getting them plated can be a huge hassle depending on your state or country. Plus, they usually need more frequent maintenance. They come with like higher strung engines for performance over longevity, and a lot of them only come with a 5-speed transmission, which kind of sucks if you plan to ride street or, the highway. That said though, if you don't really care about it being street legal and you kind of just want like a straight up hooligan bike or a track weapon, this is a good route for you. You can also look into options from a company called Dirt Legal. They can kind of help you get a plate on one of these motocross bikes. Alright guys, next we have the enduro and dual sport bikes. Now these are kind of the best option in my opinion and definitely the most popular. Yeah, some of them might look kind of ugly stock, and a few models can even feel a little sluggish at first. But with the right build, these bikes become absolute monsters, guys. They're the go-to choice for a lot of Supermoto enthusiasts. And one of the biggest advantage to the enduro and dual sport bikes is most of them come with a 6-speed transmission, which is way better for road use compared to the 5-speed motocross bikes. They also have longer maintenance intervals, which means you're not tearing down the engine every 15 hours for a rebuild, especially if you're doing street riding. To give you an idea, my personal CRF 450L has over 450 hours on it and it still runs strong. With proper care and maintenance, these bikes can last a long time, guys, especially the 4-strokes. And you don't really have to baby them. If you're into Japanese bikes, you can look at bikes like the CRF 450RL and the WR 450F from Yamaha, which are both incredible platforms to build off of. If you're more into like the Euro stuff, the KTM Husqvarna and Gas offer some amazing options. You have models like the EXC 500, the 450, and the 350. Also, guys, if you want to ride a 2-stroke, KTM, Husqvarna, and Gas options, they have plenty of 2-strokes if you look on their website. But depending on the dealership and where you live, you can get a lot of those street legal right out the dealer. You can also look into Beta. They have a full factory street legal dirt bike kind of line going on their website. And they're pretty wild machines. Also, TM builds really nice bikes, but they're not too widely available here in the US. So if you have a favorite brand, guys, just go on their website, check out what they have to offer when it comes to, their dual sports and their street legal bikes, and pick out the perfect bike that you would like to build from there. All right, guys, part two, and probably the most important part to making your bike a true Supermoto is your wheel and tire setup. So first up, you're going to need a set of 17-inch Supermoto wheels. This is going to give your bike that real Supermoto look and feel. There's tons of brands out there making wheels, and there's something for every budget, guys. If you're trying to keep it more affordable, you can check out wheels like Kiki. They're a really solid choice. I ran these on my first Supermoto build and had zero issues. Another great budget option is the Bold Designs wheels. They just started coming out with these, and they're starting to get more popular, and I think they're a pretty nice budget wheel. If you got a little bit more to spend, the most popular mid-tier option is probably the Warp 9 Elite wheels, and I'm currently running these on my CRF 450 build as well. They look good, the build quality's there, and they have a wide variety of customization for those wheels as well. You can also check out wheels like SM Pro wheels. They make a nice wheel as well. Now, if you want to go all out on something like a top tier wheel, you can look into a custom built set from Excel Wheels. They're kind of the gold standard top quality Supermoto wheel, as well as, the dirt wheels. They're lightweight, the build quality's there, and they're just an overall amazing wheel. A quick note here as well, guys, when it comes to picking a wheel, if you guys plan to do any track riding, or I should say track only riding, you can look into getting a 16.5 front wheel. That will give you kind of better grip and feel in the corners. But keep in mind, you don't really want a 16.5 front wheel for the street because tire options are super limited. You can pretty much only find race tires in a 16.5 inch wheel. All right, guys, so we're going to go over what kind of tires you can run and sizing for your Supermoto tires here. So if you've ridden a motorcycle before, you might already have a tire that you like. But again, it all comes down to what kind of riding you're going to be doing with your bike. If you want something super sticky for aggressive street riding, I recommend checking out something like the Dunlop Q5s. They're a great tire with a ton of grip. Right now, I'm personally running the Michelin Power 6, and honestly, it's my favorite tire I've tried so far. It's a really predictable tire. It grips hard. But if you're planning to be just doing a lot of stunting and goon riding, you might want a tire that's a little cheaper that you can kind of burn through. So just kind of shop around, guys, and pick out the best tire for your application of riding. So let's talk about the sizing of your tires, guys, because this can kind of make or break your fitment, especially on these dirt bike frames, man. They're built for the skinny knobby tires. They're not built for these wide Supermoto tires. So sometimes the clearances can be really tight. So for the front, I run a 110/70 tire. This size clears the forks and the fork guards with no trimming needed, guys. It fits really nice. But if you want a more aggressive look and kind of that wide look in the front, you can go with a 120 front tire. But just be aware that you're going to have to trim your fork guards. And on some bikes, it may be really, really close to your fork tubes. But for the rear, I run a 150/60 tire. This tire fits great. It fits between the swing arm good. You have good clearance on the chain. But if you want that beefy, wide look, something similar to like a sport bike, which I agree looks amazing, you can go with a 160 rear tire. But just be advised that on some models, the 160 is going to be extremely close to your swing arm and extremely within millimeters of your chain. So keep that in mind, guys. All right, guys, part 3, let's talk about brakes for your Supermoto build here. So you got your bike, you got your wheels, you're ready to toss them on and go ride. But at the bare minimum, guys, you need to upgrade your brakes. And at the very, very bare minimum, I would recommend upgrading your front rotor. Now, what I mean by that is you're going to need a bigger front rotor. That stock rotor that comes with your dirt wheels is way too small. Once you swap to the 17-inch wheels, you kind of lose leverage. And that small rotor that comes on your dirt wheels just is way too small, and you don't have enough braking force when it comes to stopping. Yes, it works, but if you try any high-speed stopping, you'll just notice the difference here. I recommend starting with just a standard oversized front rotor kit for the front. Warp 9 sells a very solid setup for the front. It's, I believe, a 320 millimeter rotor. It's what I'm running as well. And if you order some Supermoto wheels, a lot of them will even include a big rotor. But if they don't, like I said, Warp 9 sells a very nice one. Moto Master sells their street kit as well. And what these kits include is just a bigger 320 millimeter rotor usually, and a caliper relocation bracket, and this will already upgrade the front brakes a lot. Now guys, if you have a little bit more money to spend and you want even more stopping power up front, whether it's for stunning, aggressive street riding, track use, or just goon riding, you can look into something like a big brake kit for the front. MotoMaster sells their Supermoto brake kit, which includes a master cylinder, their larger front caliper, and a high performance rotor. And it's also the flame rotor. If you look it up, it looks super nice. But there's many kits out there for street and track guys, and you can even get creative when it comes to building out these kits. You can look into kits from Behringer, who makes good kits, Brembo, and there's a few other high-end options there for your brakes. I personally ran a Brembo big brake kit on my build in the past. It was a really nice kit, but one of the bolts ended up falling out and the caliper ruined my wheel, so I ended up selling the kit, and I downsized to a Warp 9 oversized floating rotor kit. And in the future, I would like to upgrade to the MotoMaster kit because it's kind of the gold standard when it comes to street supermotos. Next, guys, is going to be upgrading your brake lines. This is something that's kind of overlooked, and if you're on a KTM, Husqvarna, Gas, or many of these other Euro bikes, your bike already comes with stainless steel brake lines, so you don't have to worry about this. But if you're on a Japanese bike, something like my Honda or the Yamaha, they come with factory rubber brake lines, which aren't too good. And so if you're planning to do like a lot of wheelies, stunting, hard braking, track riding, aggressive street riding, anything crazy like that, you're going to want to upgrade to stainless steel brake lines. All this does is help prevent brake fade, which happens when your brake fluid heats up too much and your brakes get real spongy. So you can do the stainless steel lines. You can also upgrade your brake fluid to something like Motul RBF 600 or 660. On my personal build, I went with stainless steel brake lines, and I did the Motul RBF 660 fluid. Both of these will give you guys super great brake feel and also prevent brake fade and any other brake malfunctions in the future. Also, for you stunt guys, if you plan to stunt your Supermoto really hard, there's also tons of really nice handbrake options out there for your Supermotos. Now, if you're on a 4-stroke Supermoto, something like the 450 or the 500, these bikes have so much engine brake when it comes to wheelies that you absolutely do not need a handbrake, but some people just overall prefer to have the handbrake. There's nothing wrong with that. 50 stunt, they make some solid options. That's the setup I have on my bike. Bold Designs just started coming out with a few kits as well. And there's a lot of other brands out there that make these dual caliper brackets and caliper to set up a really nice handbrake for you guys. Alright guys, part 4, let's talk about gearing for your bike. What kind of sprocket and what size do you want to run? So this really depends on what kind of riding you plan to do, guys. So you need to think when you're building your Supermoto, am I going to be commuting on this bike? Am I going to be on the highway? Do I just plan to ride around town? Is this going to be my wheelie bike? So when it comes to choosing your rear sprocket size, it's kind of important. It's going to completely change your bike. So if you're going to be doing a lot of highway riding or commuting, I recommend going with a smaller rear sprocket. Something like a 42 or a 44 tooth is pretty common. That'll give you guys a lot better top speed and lower engine RPMs when you're just cruising, so you're not screaming at 65 miles an hour. But the downside is you lose a lot of low-end torque. So smaller rear sprockets can sometimes take the fun out of that snappy dirt bike power. If you want a really good balance between top speed and torque, something around a 48 tooth is a great middle ground where you still have decent top end but plenty of punch off the line and a lot of torque. Now if you want that classic aggressive like 450 torque, that dirt bike torque, you can always keep your gearing stock or even, get like a 50 tooth sprocket. I'm currently on a 50 tooth sprocket, but that's because I mainly just ride around town, do some wheelies. I like to just mess around and have fun on my bike, so I'm not really commuting or highway riding. But keep in mind, your front and rear sprocket sizes do play into your gearing. So once you pick your bike, I'd recommend joining some Facebook groups or some forum posts or even Reddit. There's usually tons of posts in there about gearing setups for these bikes, whether it's for Supermoto or not. You'll get a good general idea of what's going to be a good setup for you. Also, don't be afraid to buy like some cheap sprockets and try out some different sizes. I know on my personal Supermoto, I've gone through 5 or 6 different gearing combos to figure out what I like the best, the best feel of my bike and everything like that. All right, guys, part 6 of building your Supermoto. We're going to talk about suspension. So let's be real, that stock enduro suspension that these bikes come with is just not going to cut it if you're trying to ride Supermoto the right way. So at the bare minimum, you want to do a basic setup, which is just going to be your sag and clickers. So what I mean by this is adjust your sag to your weight. Now this is going to be in your manual, or you can even Google this. So once you get your sag set on your bike, you want to adjust the clickers on your forks and shocks. This kind of means stiffening things up as much as you can, so that your bike can handle street and supermoto riding, especially if you're doing corners, wheelies, or any kind of aggressive riding. Most enduro suspension is super soft and squishy because obviously it's made for off-road riding. So it's not going to handle hard braking on pavement or slamming into corners at speed too well. And if you leave your suspension stock and you jam on your front brakes, you're just going to feel that front end dive. Now, if you have a little bit more room in your budget, you can look into getting your suspension built. I highly recommend getting your suspension built specifically for Supermoto. There are tons of suspension shops online, and you might even have some local shops around you. You don't need a super baller setup, but if you can just send in your forks or maybe your shock and just get your setup built a lot stiffer than how it comes, you're definitely going to notice the difference. Now, if you're a track rider, you're definitely going to want to get your suspension built, and you're definitely going to probably spend a lot more than somebody that's riding on the street because you're going to want a really tuned in and responsive feel. Also, if you are a street rider and you do choose to get your suspension built, you will definitely notice the difference. It's honestly really nice having a built set of Supermoto forks. I had a local shop build mine for me on my bike, and I noticed the difference right away. That front end did not dive. It felt more planted in corners, and it just felt overall more like a street motorcycle than, kind of that loose dirt bike feel. Another thing that you can kind of look into with the suspension, this is similar, but you can look into changing your triple clamps. Now, this is absolutely not necessary. A lot of people just do this on their Supermoto for looks. I personally have a set of X-Trig Supermoto clamps on my bike, and what they do is they kind of change the offset of your front wheel. So they change like the rake of your bike. They'll actually back it up a little bit to give your bike more of an aggressive stance. And by doing this, your bike will handle a lot differently, and it'll handle a lot better for the street. Now, you absolutely do not need this upgrade if you're just going to be a casual street rider, but it's definitely something you can look into if your budget can handle it, because it looks good and it will perform very well. All right, guys, part 7. We're going to be talking about protecting your Supermoto, getting some nice protection on that bike. Now, your Supermoto is already built pretty tough because it's based off a dirt bike platform. But you do have to realize if you do wreck this bike, drop it, or loop out a wheelie or anything small like that, that you are dropping this bike on concrete and not in dirt like this bike is built for. So trust me, I've seen these bikes get some really weird parts messed up just from very minor accidents. So I always recommend getting some really nice protection on your bike. First thing you can do is get a nice set of axle sliders for the front and rear. They'll help protect your fork lugs, your swing arm, your calipers, and they also protect things like your graphics kit and your plastics and just some small details like that. But companies like BAC 3D make some amazing crash protection. That's currently what I'm running on my bike. You can also check out crash protection from 50 Stunt, Bold Designs, and a few other companies. They make really good axle slider pegs as well. And in my opinion, they look good, and they also kind of fit that Supermoto build. So the next piece of protection I do is a set of bar end sliders. A lot of people don't do these, but I always throw them on my bikes. They just help protect the little things on your bike, like your grips, your levers, your bars, just the small stuff. And it also helps keep your bike farther away from the concrete if you do happen to have a little accident or something like that. Once again, companies like BAC 3D, 50 Stunt, Bold Designs, and a few other brands all carry bar end sliders. And the last piece of protection you can get if you really want to is a exhaust protector or an exhaust slider. I have one on my bike. I know Warp 9 carries them. I'm not too sure about other brands, but all it is essentially is a piece of thin, well, it's pretty thick plastic, but it's like a ring that slips over your exhaust, and it helps protect your bike if it falls on the exhaust side and would happen to slide. You know, these Yoshimura pipes and these FMF pipes are expensive, guys, so I like to keep mine protected. All right, guys, part 8, we're going to be talking about performance for your bike. Now, if you're running a street legal enduro bike, at least in the United States, Models like the Honda and the KTM and Husqvarna, these bikes come extremely choked up from factory. They come with a lot of emissions stuff on them. They come with these really restricted pipes on them. They come with restricted ECUs on them. So I always recommend getting a nice emissions delete kit if you can do it in your state. There's companies like SD Powerhouse. They make some solid emissions delete kits for your bike. I know you can also do a few DIY kits for this as well. I would just do a little bit of research for your bike. If you have one of these street legal enduro bikes and you just Google it, there's probably a lot of stuff out there on the internet about how to delete the emissions on your particular bike. The next thing I would do, guys, is upgrade your ECU. Your factory ECU is going to be very tuned down to help with the emissions and everything. So I would go and grab something like a Vortex ECU or a Git ECU. This will help unclog your bike and really just wake up that snappy dirt bike power. Now, the last thing in this sector, guys, is going to be throwing an exhaust on your bike. Now, in my mind, this isn't even really an emissions delete thing, because I feel like this is something just everybody wants to do. Not only does it look good, sounds good, it's just overall amazing once you throw a pipe on your bike. I mean, it's hard to ride a motorcycle without having exhaust on it. So yeah, that's something you can definitely look into. You can get a nice FMF system, a full Yoshi pipe, whatever brand you like, guys, you can throw it on your bike. And if you combo the exhaust with the ECU, some of these setups can give you guys 10 plus extra horsepower on your bikes. So it's definitely worth it. All right, guys, part 9, we are going to be talking about the lights on your bike, especially if you're riding on the street. Now, most of these street legal enduro bikes come with pretty ugly big tail lights or turn signals or fenders or headlights or whatever it is, guys. They have to pass their own, mandated restrictions. So when it comes to us, we want that super clean Supermoto look, that motocross bike look. So you're going to want to change out some lights. Now, some of these models may have specific plug and play kits that you can buy, but a lot of people just kind of go with universal options. There's companies like Street OHV and Mototronics who make tons of universal lights. You can also check out eBay and Amazon. They have tons of tail lights, turn signals, and headlights and things of that matter to choose from, guys. Now, when it comes to these universal options, I know wiring can kind of sound scary, but I promise you wiring in these lights is not intimidating at all. It's honestly super simple. I know whenever I was putting lights on my bike for the first time, I was a little scared. But once I started figuring out, guys, it was pretty easy. And I've changed my lights out many of times now. If you're on any of the KTM, Gas, or Husqvarna bikes, there's companies out there like Loki's Angel Eyes who make some super sick headlights. There's also like the Hex Beam. There's some really awesome like RGB headlight options you can get for those bikes that just look super clean. All right, guys, part 10. We're getting into the fun stuff here. We're getting into the juicy stuff. We're talking about making your bike look good with a nice set of plastics and graphics, guys. So you got your bike dialed, you got the bike picked out, you got your wheels, you got all the nice stuff done to it. It's time to make it look good. Now, some people may like to keep that OEM look, keeping the OEM plastics and graphics, which is personally fine. I personally like that look too. I ran it on my bike for a long time and it looks super clean. But if you do want a set of plastics for your bike, guys, super easy. With these types of bikes, there's 1,000,001 different plastics you can go with in every color and every design. There's brands like UFO Plastics, Polysport, any of them, guys. Just Google your bike name with plastics, and there's going to be a ton that come up for you. If you do plan to do a graphics kit, you can always do like white or black plastics because those always accent your graphics very nice. Now, if you've ridden dirt bikes before, you may already have a go-to graphics company. This is another thing where there's just tons of graphics companies out there, and you may even have one local to you. So you can get these kits designed any way you want, guys. Now, the company that I always recommend is Bold Designs for the graphics. The only reason I recommend them, and this video is not sponsored by Bold Designs in any way, but the only reason I recommend them is because they sell Supermoto specific kits. Bold Designs is like a Supermoto graphics company, and they just overall have like super sick kits. They already have pre-made templates. You can get custom made kits however you want. They have things like chrome, holographic, glitter, hand laid. They just have all kinds of crazy options, guys. And that's personally who I went with, was Bold Designs. I have the red chrome kit on my bike and I love it. Another thing that Bold does sell is 50/50 wheel decals. Now, this is kind of an iconic Supermoto thing to have that 50/50, you know, black and whatever color wheel, to have that two-tone wheel. They actually sell 50/50 decals for this, which is super awesome. I have them on my bike. I have the matching red chrome, and in my opinion, that just completes the bike. Even if you're doing that OEM look and you just throw on that 50/50 wheel, it just looks so good. All right, guys, part 11. At this point, your Supermoto is already looking sick. You got the full build dialed, you got fresh graphics on there, but you're ready to take it to the next level. So if you have it in your budget, guys, there's a few custom upgrades that you can do to make your bike kind of stand out from the crowd. First is going to be getting some carbon fiber parts. So there's tons of companies out there making carbon fiber parts for these dirt bikes. My go-to company is CMT Composite, and I know a lot of people go with them. The first thing I always do is slap on like a carbon tank cover, because when you're riding your bike, it's always in the line of sight. You're always seeing it. So having that there is just amazing, being able to look down to see carbon. But companies like CMT, they sell everything under the sun when it comes to carbon parts, guys. You can get carbon swing arm covers, carbon frame covers, you got the tank cover, carbon fork covers. They sell literally everything. So with the carbon, guys, you can go as crazy as you want. And recently on Instagram, I've been seeing a ton of these small companies coming out that sell this really awesome custom forged carbon and different colored carbon options. So you can really go insane with the carbon and really accent your build with this stuff. Next, we're going to be going over Cerakoting and powder coating, guys. This is absolutely not necessary, but if you really want to elevate your build, you can definitely start taking parts off and getting things custom Cerakoted and powder coated. You know, you can do things like your shifter, your brake. I mean, you can go crazy and powder coat your frame. Literally anything you can get powder coated, and this really just elevates your build. And if you don't like that powder coated, Cerakoted look, some people like the more OEM look. Don't be afraid to start taking parts off and polishing them. That's personally what I did. I polished my shifter, my brake, I polished my frame. That polished look is classic and it just looks amazing. But personally, guys, this all comes down to your style, how you want your build to look. I would say the last thing that you could do to really make your Supermoto build pop is getting some titanium bolts or some accent hardware. This is kind of one of the more slept on mods when it comes to building out a bike. Me personally, I went with a company called Racetech Titanium. I have a ton of blue titanium bolts on my bike, and it's just one of them details, one of those small details that like you wouldn't think matters, but when I'm just looking at my bike, those bolts stand out and they just look amazing. I also did some red bolts on my plastics, and those also look great. So don't be afraid to start, you know, getting in on some custom bolts, guys, because they look awesome once you get it all finished. All right, guys, well, that is how to build a Supermoto. I really hope this video helped you guys out. I tried to make it in-depth as possible. If you guys have any questions, just leave them down below. I'm going to try to respond to every comment that I can. I know a lot about these bikes, and I'm hoping I was able to explain it easily for you guys to understand. So thanks for watching, guys.